Adam's take on this so that we can all, as we go, I wanted to just break it down so you all appreciate and go for it. Yeah, 2 days ago, the finance minister was actually appealing to all Ghanaians to support the program. But to do that, you need to understand what it means. And so let's go to the other one that affects every single soul in this land called Ghana. And it's in the document. It says, automatically adjust fuel levies by exchange rate movement or inflation. Immediately you hear fuel, you know that you are in dangerous territory. So, Dr. Amin Adam, this particular clause, when it comes to the what they call the medium-term revenue strategy, which they expect that cabinet should approve very soon. The requirement for government now to implement this automatic adjustment in fuel levies by exchange rate movement or inflation. How is this different from the current deregulator regime that we have? Is it the same or this is different?
Well, first of all, the 2 million employment John Jinapor talked about is referring to government staff levels. As if all the recruitment as a result of government programs are all coming into the formal government sector. 2 million employment. Government is doing too many projects around the country. So apart from the people who are recruited into the formal government sector, there are people who are also recruited to undertake projects funded by government. And so you should understand the context of the 2 million people who have been employed over the last few years that we've been talking about. But secondly, I do appreciate that we will have to do things different from the way we did things. It's not going to be business as usual. And so, yes, workers and Ghanaians all over will have to bear with us. But in doing this, we are also very sensitive to the plight of the people, especially the poor and the vulnerable. And so in this particular program, there's a heavy component on social intervention that we negotiated into the program. LEAP, for example, has been doubled, and we are going to increase funding on LEAP. We also are going to also spend more on school feeding program. It's also doubled. NHIS, senior high school program, is going to continue. And so, even though we will have some difficulties, we have been very careful in negotiating this program to ensure that the very vulnerable segments of our society, not the likes of Jinapor, but those who are affected directly by government policies, they are also given safety net so that we can uplift them. As far as the wages are concerned, Dr. Tumasi mentioned that they may have to call for some consideration because inflation is high, prices are going to increase, and when that happens, there is need for adjustment in the salary. I appreciate that, but we all know that this program is also intended to achieve macro stability, and so we are working to reduce inflation. We are working to ensure that inflation goes further down to single digits. We've recorded single digits before. Before COVID started, we had single-digit growth was at 7%. The exchange rate was very stable, and so we want to go back to the period before COVID. And so there may not be that case for prices to increase. That may warrant consideration for adjustment in salaries from 54% by end of last year. It's currently 41%, and it's going to further go down. Let me also add that the difficulties we're talking about, even if we didn't go to the IMF, we would have been asked by the policies we've taken through the budget to adjust ourselves, because some of the measures have already been front-loaded into this budget. And so when people say the increases in taxes here and there, we already have front-loaded them in the 2023 budget, and we're going to continue to improve on the efficiency of the collection. We're going to continue to expand the tax net. The property rate that we are trying to do to bring in some money. EVAT is being pursued seriously. We are also reforming the e-levy in order to improve collection. And so they have been front-loaded already. And to the extent that we can work so hard with the support of Ghanaians to be able to realize our revenue objectives will help in bringing
Yeah, I mean,
down.
on the revenue bit, my substantive question, I'll return to that shortly. But on the revenue bit, because you brought it up, you're saying
but
that.
before you come, let me just answer directly your question on.
No, I'll come to that. I'll come to that because you just said revenue. So let me just ask one further clarity on revenue. Categorically, you're saying there'll be no new taxes.
I didn't say that. I said that people are saying that there will be tax increases here and there.
Okay.
And I'm saying that we have already front-loaded some of this in the 2023 budget.
Okay.
And so what we have to do is to make sure that we collect. And we are going to improve on our efficiency in the collection. We're going to also expand the tax net further so that those who are not paying, we want to go after them so that we can be able to improve.
So that is improving efficiency. But I guess any clarity to the question, let me just rephrase it. Are we going to have fresh taxes?
Well, I mean, we are now developing what we call the medium-term revenue strategy.
Yes.
The medium-term revenue strategy, depending on the conditions as we go forward, will define what the government tax strategy will be going forward.
Okay, good. Now let's address the substantive, and I'll come to that. Please make notes on the revenue.
Okay, so you were talking about automatically adjusting.
It says, I just want to quote it. It says automatically adjusting fuel levies by exchange rate movement and inflation. What does that mean exactly? In the context of the deregulated regime?
Yeah, it is the same as we have also in the electricity sector. And we are trying to, move away from the regime where these prices were done arbitrarily, to a more, macroeconomic induced adjustment. And so, as I indicated, whilst inflation continues to go down and the exchange rate stabilizes and the cedi becomes stronger, you should expect a downward review. For the first time in the history of our country, transport fares have been reduced by transport operators. I mean, this is because fuel prices are reflecting inflation, are reflecting exchange rates, are reflecting what the deregulated regime has defined for us to follow in terms of not just fuel pricing but also electricity pricing. PURC announced an increase in tariff adjustment, but we are also aware that, as they have announced in their statement, they are trying to recover forex under recoveries from previous adjustments. But with inflation coming down and the exchange rate stabilizing, we should expect future adjustments to be lower and lower than they have been in the past.
Okay, and on the transport matter this morning, the GPRT, they've withdrawn the 10% increase decrease, the reduction because of controversy over, whether you should implement it. And I think the analysis they gave for withdrawal is because they didn't factor in the spare parts component, which is still an issue. So it's this morning.
I think that may be pressure coming from their members, but the reality is that they announced a 10% decrease in fares. We may have to engage them to find out the reason for, and they gave reasons for that, why they announced a 10% reduction in fares. We may have to engage them to find out what new developments have occasioned the withdrawal of that announcement.
I want to bring in Dr. Tue Champon. Doc, so first, and there's a revenue one that the minister had clarified, but quickly take for me the automatic adjusting fuel levies by exchange rate movement and inflation, which is just explained there. If you're going to do that, and the anticipation is that the cedi is going to stabilize significantly going forward, which is a huge factor in the price volatility when it comes to fuel on the market, that is good in the long term, is it not? If the cedi stabilizes and continues to strengthen, because then you're going to see automatic adjustments that will mean reductions. Is that how you're reading this?
And implementing this automatic regime for a very long time now, so it's nothing new, like Honorable was saying. What should or what we didn't do, if you recall, during the pandemic, fuel taxes and these levies and electricity prices should have gone up, right? But we did not make those increases or adjustments for well about 1.5 going into 2 years. So by the time we made the first adjustment, we're already catching up with 2 years worth of reduction in value as a result of the inflation going up. And then there's been some subsequent adjustments as well. But going forward, it's all really predicated on the fact that if you get inflation under control, and even the prices of the product also comes down, then the pass-through of that into electricity tariffs or even for fuel prices at the pumps begins to come down. But I struggle a little bit to see how that will come down, at least in the short term. So inflation now is about 40 or so percent. And under the IMF program conditions that we've signed with the fund, Table 2, which is titled Performance Criteria and Indicative Targets. By December of this year, inflation should be within a central band of about 29%, and then March it comes down to about 26.9%. So basically, we need some big incremental reduction, or actually big reduction in inflation levels for us to meet those program targets, and for that subsequently to feed through into a reduction of prices at the pumps or when it comes to buying utilities. But the structure or the pricing setup has always been there anyway under the automatic formula, just that we were not implementing it in a consistent manner. On the revenue question that you asked, paragraph 24, I think page 13 of the document, when I listed them, I could count 7 different tax reforms, or let's call it more broadly, domestic revenue mobilization initiatives. So the first one is removing some of the exemptions that we give on VAT, and that's meant to give us or save us 2% of GDP. The second thing is reforming of the corporate income tax regime. And there the issue is that the way we give the tax holidays, the way we give, again, exemptions, and even some of the companies tend to engage in some aggressive profit shifting. So if you do some reforms there, again, you can make some savings. Then there is something around customs exemptions. So what happens at the ports? There is stuff to do with personal income taxes that needs to be more progressive. We've discussed the fuel levy. The 2 other probably new ones that I think is featuring in this conversation, but subject to more stakeholder consultations, is the introduction or the adoption of a new tax fiscal regime for the extractive industry. And I'm sure Honorable would know a lot about this.
Yeah.
We've been working within that space, and I support that call. But of course, we need to see the details. The take home for all of these conversations is that at the end of the day, if you look at the macro numbers that we need to attain by the end of this program in 2026, for our revenue and grants, we need to move it from 15.7% as of 2022 to 18.7% by 2026. So that's basically an upward adjustment of 3 percentage points of GDP, right? So that has to go up. And then on the expenditure side, we need to cut expenditure, the primary expenditure, which does not include your interest payments. So that needs to be moving down from 19.3% to 17.2% by 2026, or negative 2.1% percentage point reduction. This is where I think it gets interesting, because again, if you look at the size of the adjustments that are required, one, if you look at our own behavior as a people and as government in the past, where we commit to these targets, but we're unable to really meet all of them. And number three, given the prospect that there's an election next year on the horizon, you begin to wonder if these, really aggressive targets that the government has committed itself to would be met, because you need to make some really sizable adjustments. If you look at the document, they've got to make an adjustment of about 5% of GDP over 3 years, and about 2/3 of that, right, 66%, have to be done in this year going into next year. And with an election around the corner, I begin to wonder if that could really be fully, attained in that regard.
And I'll get the minister's take on that, the commitment there, but Mr. Junapor.